Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I'm seeing a ton of comments already. Hi, everybody. How are you? Couple minutes late today, guys. Some technical difficulties, but it's okay. We're happy you guys are here. It's a Friday. How's everyone's Friday going? Wonsulting Underdogs. I love it. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. We'll give everyone about 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Good morning. Good morning. Hi, everybody.
This is so exciting.
I know. How's your morning going, Marie?
It's going well. It's Friday. Best day of the week. Next one to Saturday. So can't wait.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. Same. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so much fun. Look at everybody go. I wonder where everyone's watching from.
Comment your locations.
Yeah, I want to know.
I'm in Southern California. I'm based here in Anaheim. So in Orange County, right by Disney.
Oh, lucky.
I know.
So lucky. It's like one of my dreams is to be just like over the hill to like Disneyland.
Literally, probably a 30-minute walk.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, super close.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
I'm coming over.
Let's do it. We'll do a coffee Disney day.
Yes. We should like do these like live from Disneyland. That would be fun.
Oh, that'd be super fun. Like live from Magic or from Space Mountain.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Salt Lake City, Utah. Oh my goodness. Hi, everybody.
Wow. Spain, UK. That's cool. I love it.
Awesome. Alrighty, everybody. Well, thank you so much for coming. Once again, if you guys are new here, my name is Cheyenne. I'm the Chief of Staff here at Wonsulting. We're so excited to have you. So excited to be talking you through with our guest speaker, Marie. She's amazing. We're so thankful you're here, Marie. I would love if you could just give our audience a brief introduction, tell them about yourself, any other fun things you want to let our audience in on, and then we'll kind of get started from there.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's so much fun to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and so good to like finally meet you. I guess like IRL almost, right? Like I know we've exchanged a couple messages, so it's so good to like see your face and be here, and hi to everyone. Yeah, so for everybody, I'm Maria Plaza. I'm currently a recruiter at Netflix. I'm helping to recruit for their new game development studio, which has been super fun. So if anyone knows me on LinkedIn, I am known as your fairy job mother. Getting to share all the fun recruiting realities out there, through the platform. And yeah, just really excited to chat today about this topic. I get a lot of this, through my DMs and through messages and comments. And so I'm always one for just like, let's just talk about it out loud. So I'm excited to jump in.
I love it. Wow. Round of applause, everybody, for Marie. Thank you so much. We're so happy you're here. Marie, what's your favorite emoji?
My favorite emoji? Oh my gosh. I would say I like my flame, my fire one, and also my fairy one.
Flame or fairy? Okay, guys, drop a flame or a fairy in the comments. We want to see that flooding the comment box right now. That's like a big round of applause for Marie. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking about a super hot topic, converting rejections into offers. So Marie and I would love to start this part of the conversation off with a Q&A. We want to answer your questions. We want to know what you guys are looking for. What are, maybe you feeling fatigued about in the job search? And then we'll kind of transition out of a Q&A into more structural based questions that I see a lot from you guys, whether it's on Wonsulting's Instagram, comments, DMs, things that you guys messaged John and Jerry. We're here. We're happy to help. And I'm sure Marie can definitely plus one off of anything you guys are maybe curious about, since she does have so much experience. So go ahead and flood that timeline with all of your questions, and we'll go ahead and get started with answering those.
Nice. Exciting. Yay, I love the emojis that are flooding in.
I know, I love it. Awesome. I see some of you tuning in from YouTube. Hi to our YouTube family. How are you guys doing? Tons of LinkedIn. I love it. How fun. Hi, hi. Yes. Hello. Perfect. While we're waiting for some of these questions to come in, guys, I'm going to go ahead and start off with just one so we can kind of wait for everybody to get through typing out their messages. So I would love to know, Marie, what rejections did you kind of maybe come across before you became a recruiter that made you say, when I, have to reject somebody, I definitely will not be doing that. Like, I will not be approaching a rejection in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So being a recruiter is so unique, right? Because especially now in this landscape, everyone has a different, experience with recruiters. There's some recruiters who are very open, transparent, will let you know the update if there's an update, even if an update is no update, right? I think I'm more so off of that because, yeah, when it comes to rejection, and especially like in the recruiting space now, like seeing what that looks like on the other side, like as a candidate, like, yeah, it sucks when you don't have any type of messaging or communication if you've moved forward or not. And that's the worst. Like, I feel like that's worse than not knowing anything at all, right? Like, I know everyone's like, no one wants to be ghosted. And, I rather just have, the reason that, hey, we're just not moving forward with you versus not knowing anything at all. And so through my experience, I've had both of those, right? I've had very transparent recruiters tell me, hey, we're not moving forward with you at this time. There's more experienced people than you. I'm able to take that and go, versus, the other side where it's like, I've just never heard anything at all, right? Like, I mean, I've interviewed for things even like 10 years ago that I still have never gotten a response on. And I'm always like, I wonder what happened to that. So now as a recruiter, that's something that's super important to me, that, that's the kind of recruiter I want to be, is, just letting people know, hey, like, if it's going to be a rejection, if it's like, hey, we're not moving forward with you, then that's what I want to be able to share with folks, because it's just better to have that communicated out than for people to wait, right? Because I know the waiting part is the hardest. So 100%. I want to try and make it easier. I know rejections aren't easy, but I think it helps when you at least have an answer.
Love it. I love that. I can definitely agree with you. I think there were times, whether that if you guys are maybe in college and you're applying to internships, right, and you're going in this huge competitive field, which I think is pretty similar across, looking for internships as a early career or even in college, and then kind of transitioning that into the workforce, wondering, am I approaching this the right way? If I don't hear anything back, what does ghosting do to my morale as a job seeker? What does it do for me in terms of wanting to go back to that company? And everybody, there's a different way to approach recruiting, but ultimately when you get that rejection or maybe don't hear back, we're going to be breaking down today a little bit more for you about the best ways to go about maybe getting back in touch with that recruiter if you're so dedicated to wanting to work there. That passion and that extra stride really does speak a lot about you and your motivation for that role. So we'll be breaking that down a little bit more. Maria, I'm seeing a ton of questions coming in here. Yeah. One of them that I'm seeing is Jordan said they would love to hear about you finding your direction after receiving automated rejections.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's starting to unpack a little bit of that topic that you were just talking about. But yeah, I mean, like, getting rejections is hard. I think backing it up, I think the way that I've been able to handle rejections is knowing that's the reality, right? Like, even I'm going to apply to 100 jobs and only I'm going to be one. I'm only going to get one. Right. And on the recruiter end, they will have only one job, but a million applicants. Right. So like, rejection either side of the table like is going to happen. So I think like, as you're going into like job seeking or anything, in general, knowing that rejection is the reality is the first place to start, like knowing that that's real, right? And accepting that and being okay with it. And then like rebounding from it. I mean, it's really, for me, I'm all about reframing, I'm always reframing things in a way where I'm not going to shift the blame to someone, right? Like if, Cheyenne, I apply for your company and you reject me, I'm not going to be mad at you, right? Like I'm not going to be upset with you. I'm not going to be upset with the company. Instead, I'm going to take that and start my own self-reflection. Like, and ask myself, why did I get rejected? What could have been, whether I got a response or not, right? Like whether I even got feedback or not. I think having that self-reflection is so important because, you have to have a little bit of self-awareness to know, like, okay, well, when I was in my interview, I was super nervous. Okay, maybe that was one thing. Oh, when they asked me that one question, I really couldn't answer it. Maybe it could have been that. Right. So like sometimes I think about it in that sense of, what were those areas, in interviews or even in my resume that like may not have met the role one-to-one, and how do I fix it and get better moving forward, right? So I think it's always reframing it in a way where you look at yourself in the mirror and you say like, okay, this is not the company's fault, this is not that recruiter's fault, but if there was something that I didn't have or I missed out on, or I could have done better with, and could make an improvement on, then I'm going to take that. And like, that's how you rebound, because that's how you take it, right? And like make it work for you. Because I think another thing about rejection is people think that it's always something to work against, but it's like, no, accept the rejection, accept where you may have failed or like may not have met 100% of something, and go exceed that, go 110% the next time, right? So
I totally agree.
yeah.
I think something too that we see a lot on Wonsulting side is when it comes to rejection, obviously it can sting, it can hurt, but I think another thing that we need to think about as well is maybe even if you don't hear a yes, you can always reach back out to that recruiter and say, hey, I would love some feedback about how the interview went. Thank you so much for, letting me know about the rejection. I hope you guys find your ideal candidate. Moving forward, this is still a company that I aspire to work at, or maybe a role I aspire to be in. Are there any tips or tricks or anything that you recommend based on what you saw from my performance that you would, suggest I work on, or maybe learn more about, maybe come in more confidently? And everybody, just a heads up, that is a huge thing that we see. And I'm sure, Marie, you can probably vouch for this, that taking that extra mile to, ask those questions to your recruiter, not only will it keep you top of mind next time around potentially, but it shows them that you're dedicated to this, right? So if they happen to be the hiring manager on another role that you're looking for, or they're recruiting for someone else, you could be right there along with the top contenders.
Absolutely. Yes. I am always for one, do not burn a bridge with your recruiter. Like we are there. Like, I mean, that is our job, right? Like our job is to find candidates for roles we're hiring for. And just because you may not have been the candidate for this role, there's so many roles that could be coming that like might be a fit for you in the future. But don't let this one rejection, like, don't burn that bridge. And I've seen that happen before, and it's really sad because, again, I get it, emotions get in the way when you get rejected. But again, like, it's always good to step back and just say, okay, I got rejected, it sucks, right? But I'm not going to take it out on this person. And that's a great approach, and like, go reach back out to that recruiter. And if anything, like, recruiters love when people can take rejection positively. Like, 100%. Write that down, everyone who's watching. Like, I'm serious. Like, recruiters love it when you are positive through rejection, because that also shows like a tactfulness, right? And just a good judge of character. Like, oh wow, like, they were job searching and I know it sucks and they could have taken this rejection any other way, but instead they said thank you, they followed up, they asked if they could get feedback, they want to keep in touch, they still are a fan of the company, of the product, of the service, whatever it is, and they want to keep getting better to improve whatever they need to improve to be able to come back again, for potential opportunities in the future. Like, we love that, and so I know it's hard though. I will. So here's a recruiting reality drop. Like, not every recruiter is able to share feedback, right? Like, sometimes it could be like a company policy where, we're just not allowed to like go and like, share too much of direct feedback, right? But I have seen other recruiters, I have recruiting friends who can do that. Like, they are able to say, hey, the reason why we didn't hire you is because of X, Y, and Z. And here's what you can do to get better, right? And so, it really just depends on the recruiter. I think there's a lot of subjectivity in that part. So, but I still say, regardless if a recruiter can or can't give you feedback, asking that question is still good, right? Because at least it still shows that recruiter like, hey, this person is taking rejection in a way that they want to like flip it to like be better next time, and that they want to continue to foster this relationship because this is a company that they want to work in, right? I mean, personal story too. Like, it took me forever to get to Disney. Like, I've worked for Disney in the past, and they're like a very hard company to get in. And I got rejection after rejection after rejection too. But I kept in touch with all those recruiters that I met because I'm like, one of these days, one of these people might be able to help me to get there, right? And that actually happened. Like, I got a call back from Disney. They actually called me back and said, hey, we have a role. It didn't work out this last time, but we know that this is something that you're really interested in, and we have a role now that might better fit you. And that was just because I kept in touch, right? That was just because I didn't give up, but also like I didn't take rejection, personally. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to keep getting better until I finally land something. So
I love it. That's so cool. And everyone, I think that just goes to show you, right? Like, people say, well, how do I know that I'm ever going to be able to get there? Marie is a true example. Like, time and time again, putting in the effort, making the connections, doing your part, right, on building your brand, building your network, keeping in touch, and really doing that internal reflection, which I think is a part of the job search people don't often talk about, but how important it is to sit back and say, maybe that wasn't my best. What can I do now? And that's a really great opportunity to take your rejection and turn it into an offer, because that moment when you can internalize, reset, and re-go, it gives you a new perspective, but also it gives you a newfound motivation to say, I know now that these are the healthy coping mechanisms for me to make this happen for myself, and this is how I'm going to go about it. So that's awesome. I see another question here from Lydia. Thank you so much, Lydia. It says, I took a break from work for taking care of my kids. It's about an 8-year gap, and she's feeling low in confidence that she'll be the last choice for any recruiter. Any suggestions for her so that way she could potentially turn a rejection into an offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, having career gaps is hard, right? Like that is such a reality for a lot of people, right? Like, even in the last couple years, right? With like COVID and having lifestyle shift and whatnot, like it's definitely hard. I definitely say, like, you have to have conversations with people. Like, I think that is like the best way to turn that narrative around for yourself and use it to your advantage, right? Because I think if you're just putting out resumes and applications and people see that gap, unfortunately that subjectivity still lies there, right? Like, there might just be recruiters out there who see that and be like, well, that's quite a long gap, right? Like, and whatever happened in between it, it's still a big gap, and that's all they see. But if you're able to, again, start networking, start talking to people, start actually sharing your story on like, hey, this is actually what I've, why I took this break. This is what was important to me during that time. And also, here are some of the things that I might have picked up along the way. Maybe I've upskilled in those couple of years that I was out of work. Or here are the things that I'm now going to be picking up, now that I'm in my job search. Like, that's how you control that narrative. Because I think that's the hardest part about having career gaps is like people who don't know you can make up narratives that they want, right? And just be like, well, that's a long gap. 8 years is a lot and whatever, right? Like, they can just kind of put that by the wayside. But I think it's so important that that you take care of it in a way where you share your story, you control that narrative, start networking, start talking to people. And then also talk to other people who have been in that same situation. There's so many people who have been out, who got back in, and they've had different tips and tricks to help themselves in that transition. So surrounding yourself with those people could also really help, because they might even have resources, right? Like they might have resources or people that they can connect you with on hey, you had quite a career gap. Here's someone, or here's a resource that you can go to that can help optimize your job search so that gap isn't at a disadvantage, but used more so for an advantage.
Makes sense. I love it. All right. We have another question. Mary, thank you so much for sending it in. It says, I think every time that international applicants, especially people, she's from Africa, I'm assuming, apply for jobs outside of their jurisdiction, they feel as though they get automatic rejections. What do you think that they could do to help shift that for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think having to apply internationally, or knowing that you might need relocation outside or inside of a country, or visa applications, those are really difficult because that's not something that is on the job description, right? But I will say there are companies and there are companies that do accept applicants who do need relocation or visa or outside of the country, because as a recruiter, I even talk to my hiring managers about that, when I open up a role, those are one of my top questions. I'm are we hiring locally only, right? If this role is just in LA, are we just hiring in LA? Are we open to anyone else in other states? Are we open to remote? Are we open to candidates who need visas? Are we open to candidates outside of the US, right? I ask my hiring managers those questions, and we walk through those, we see yeah, we are, or no, we're not, right? And so it's hard to tell when you're a job seeker what you can or can't apply to. But I've always said always apply to it if you see it, if that's something that you want to do and you're interested in. You just never know, because the back end discussion that's happening between the recruiter and the hiring manager, they might just be hey, you know what, we might even want to shift. I might be hiring for a role that's just in LA today, but next week the hiring manager goes, you know what, I actually want to go remote now. Oh, okay. That could also happen in the middle of recruitment. So, hopefully that encourages you, always apply if you see it, even if you are outside of, the location that might be listed, because they could help you with transitioning, relocation, visa, sponsorship, all of those things.
And how does a shift like that, Marie, kind of affect the hiring process? Let's say they did go from oh, we're just hiring locally to oh, remote. So maybe that option does expand to other potential candidates. What does that look like?
Yeah. So if I've already gone through candidates and I may have disposition candidates who are outside of that LA area, and now we want to go remote, I'll go back into those candidates, say, okay, well, these candidates we said no to because they're outside of the region that we're hiring in. Let's bring them back in the pool. Let's reassess their resume and say, okay, now we're open to remote. Here's a candidate that we said no to because they're in Virginia, but now if we are really looking at remote, they might be a viable candidate. So we go back in and enter them into the pipeline again. So that's what that would look like, so we could be reconsidering.
That's awesome, guys. See, it just goes to show no matter what stage you think, oh, well, I should have heard back from them by now, maybe there was a shift. Maybe that is prolonging a little bit more of that interaction between you and a recruiter, or you and a hiring manager. So take your time and give it space. I think that it's always good to follow up, obviously, if you can, or if you have contact with them, but also know that there is one of them usually to a ton of applicants. So if they can get to you, or they think you're, a good fit for the role, they will do their best to get in contact with you ASAP. So another question that I'm seeing is, Steve, thank you so much for sending this in. They said, should I ask for feedback every time I get a rejection? And how do you make the conversation happen? Maybe what's the right way to approach that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on the type of rejection, right? I feel if it's an automated rejection, maybe that's not the time to ask for feedback, right? Because that may just be an automatic rejections. Maybe no one's actually seeing that email. So I wouldn't get that lost. But But if it was like, yeah, if you actually interviewed with someone, a recruiter, a hiring manager, or a panel or anything, and you got rejected after one of those, yeah, like I would say always ask for feedback. Again, you may not guarantee a response, right? Because again, depends on the company. Like they may be able to share feedback, maybe they can't. But I think you should always shoot your shot to like ask for that feedback, because you just never know. Like someone might actually give you something. Or again, it just shows up in a way that it's like, wow, they are just proactively wanting to get better, right? Because like I've had examples of, I rejected like 2 different candidates, same role, 2 different candidates. I said, we're not moving forward with your application at this time. We have people who are more experienced. One answered me and said, thanks. That was it. Just thanks. I'm like, okay, I mean, that's fine. That's totally fine. You're welcome, right? That's my response back. You're welcome. The second candidate said, thank you so much. If these people have more experience, like what does that look like? I'm just curious. And I was like, wow, that's cool, right? So I just said, well, some of these candidates have, like 2 to 3 years more experience than you do, right? And like, they have a little bit more experience in this program that we're looking for. Or maybe specifically to my, my world, like, well, they have like, more experience in gaming, that we are looking for to anchor for this role. And once I gave them that, the candidate was like, wow, thank you so much. Like that makes a lot more sense. And, I can't wait to, hopefully have more experience in gaming and build up those years of experience to be in consideration for something like this again in the future. Like that's great, right? Like that's a great conversation versus the thanks, right? I mean, the thanks is still good, but like how you respond and how, you ask the questions, like you could solicit a response. So
100%. 100%. I totally agree. I've been in the position, with former companies and even with Wonsulting where helping in the hiring process, maybe being that first front end of the interviews, and people kind of come back with like, oh, well, why not? And you're happy to give that, that insight where you can, but it's also the people that don't respond that you think, oh, well, that person I was still considering for maybe another role, or I thought it was a different opportunity for them. The more connections you continue to reinforce with whoever you're speaking with, I think goes back to that don't burn bridges. But I also think it goes back to this idea of like, we're all still people, right? We all still want the best for each other. We're all still, this is a job, but you still feel for them. The process is hard. So just remember, everyone, like your recruiters, your hiring managers, the front end people in your interview process, they're still rooting for you. They have no reason not to. It's more so like they just have these rules and obligations that they have to kind of check off. And sometimes there's just people who check more boxes, and that's okay, because eventually you'll get there and there is a role for you where you do check all the boxes. You just have to find it.
Totally. I'd love to share like one story on this of like what it's like to like come back again. But I had a candidate, this was back when I was at Ubisoft. I had a candidate and I talked to him, and he just never just had that right amount of experience. Like he always interviewed, I always interviewed him because I just really, we built a relationship over time, and I was like, man, I really want to help this person. But every time he would interview for one of my jobs, like he just wasn't there yet, right? Like he just wasn't there. And I kept telling him, I'm like, you need a little bit more experience. You need a little bit more experience. We talked for 3 years. He interviewed for like multiple jobs. But before I left Ubisoft, I ended up hiring him. After 3 years of building his experience, we finally landed on a job. And I'm like, this is it. This is your role. He interviewed. He killed it in the interview. I told my hiring manager, I'm like, I don't know if you remember this person, but he has been interviewing here for like the past 3 years. And every time I'm always telling him, you need just that little bit extra more. And he did that, right? Like he went out, got the experience elsewhere, made sure that he like, really honed in on that craft. And then like when he finally interviewed with me again for that final role, like it ended up working out. So, I mean, I know that's a long time. I know that a lot of people probably don't have 3 years to like sit and wait, but that's the thing. He didn't sit and wait. He kept going on his grind and kept upskilling, doing the things he needed to do to get this experience. And then when he finally like interviewed for that last job with me, you know, it was like the perfect timing. He had the experience, you know, like it was exactly what we're looking for. He worked on that skill to make sure like he can come to this interview saying like, I finally now have this experience. And it all worked out. So, you know, that is such a great story and just one of my favorites because it again shows the relationship between like recruiter and candidate, how long it can actually be in reality. That was 3 long years, but you know, he's killing it now in his role, and I'm like so proud of him. So
I love it. And that's the thing too, right? Like here you are years later still talking about that. So it just reminds you like the extent candidates will go to. And I think that what you said is really relatable. People don't have 3 years, but I think it comes back to this idea that Wonsulting and I always hear as well, which is this is my dream company. How do I get there? Maybe I'm not the right fit right now, but I feel like I'll never be the right fit. The reality of it is when you have that kind of commitment, you know you don't want to let anything stand in your way, even though it's hard to pick yourselves up and try again sometimes. Take those moments, take that time like we talked about before, but ultimately getting back out there is the best thing you can do, because the more you continuously try to showcase yourself, your skill, your growth, the more those people, those companies, those hiring manager recruiters, they will remember you and they will, you know, egg you on. They want you to succeed. So they're going to be in your corner cheering you on, just waiting, like you said, just this little bit more growth of this skill, and then you'll be good for X role. And when you have recruiters that are, you know, in your corner, 100%, I think you feel more motivated, but also you can continue doing what you're doing now while working towards that long-term goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's such a great ad. Yep.
Yeah, I love it. All righty, let's go ahead to another question. Emily said, hello, what do you suggest to do when you get simply ghosted by a recruiter after 1 or 2 rows of interviews and everything seemed to be going really well? You try to reconnect several times. You say thank you so much for the conversations you've had, but still aren't hearing any answer.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm sorry if that's something that has happened to you. But yeah, I mean, if you, as long as you're doing your part, right? Like I feel when it comes to ghosting, like, and really like anything that you respond to, it's always a reflection of you, right? And so I think if you've done all of those things, hey, you know, I'm checking up, I'm following up. Hey, I haven't heard back from you. Here's an email, here's a phone call, here's a voicemail. I'm still not following up. I mean, you really do have to, you know, you have to draw the line for yourself, right? Like, and you said something earlier, Shan, about just like having a healthy way of coping with it is so important. Unfortunately, ghosting is a thing. I wish it wasn't, but it seems like it is a thing. But I think as long as you've done what you needed to do to reach out, if you're still not getting a response, like I honestly, my advice is just walk away. You know, you can focus your energy on people who do respond, right? Like you can focus your energy in other ways to continue to upskill, get better, and you know, surround your folks who, you know, will be there, you know, to respond to you. So that's really the piece of advice. Like I don't have anything more, because it's like if someone's ghosted you, that's really a reflection of them, right? And I'm not saying like they're bad people or anything, but it's like if they chose to do that, then that's what they chose. But what you choose in response to that is always a reflection of you. So if you can pick up and say, you know what, here's my last email to you, I'm still not hearing a response. You know, thank you so much again for having me, but I will have to, you know, just walk away now and, you know, pursue other opportunities. Like that puts you in a better light than trying to chase them and like building resentment and getting angry. Cause I know that's sometimes the response to getting ghosted. Like you want to lash out, which I get. Sometimes it's a normal response, but not always the best response. Right. So yeah. So, you know, I just say like, if you've tried everything, just walk away.
I love it. And I think that also says a lot about you as a candidate, right? Taking that time to say, I know I deserve better than that. I know that I deserve to be heard back from. And maybe that's a way for you to get an insight into that recruiter. Maybe you don't want to necessarily work with them, or maybe if that's a company policy, maybe that's something you look on to. Not saying that every recruiters are a direct reflection of their company, but also think about, what would you, if you were in their shoes, what would you want? How would you want to be treated? And I think that for me, when I was in that job search process, I thought a lot about that, which was, I give these recruiters so much respect because I know their job's hard. I also know there's 1,000 potential applicants and there's one of them, right? So we give them a little bit more leniency, but I also know how important it is for me as someone who's been on that side, who's been a hiring manager, who's been a recruiter, to take that second as well and say, hi, thank you so much for sending this email. Even if it's a quick one-liner, there is a way to get back to people and not really feeling acknowledged in that way. Just kind of tells you as a candidate, maybe I need to shift that focus, like you said, to other places where I am potentially more valued. So I love that. I see a question coming in from YouTube. Whitney, thank you so much. It says, after making it to the final stages of a process and getting rejected, I'm assuming they're saying the interview process, I'm struggling with applying to the company again. Would you recommend reaching out to a recruiter or just going in blind for another application?
That's a really great question. Yeah. So I guess like my follow-up question to think about is, if you're going to reapply to that company, like, what is the role, right? Like, is the role similar to the role you just got rejected to? Because if that's the case, like, say, hey, I applied for a marketing associate. I got through the rounds of interviews and I got rejected. Now there's another marketing associate role that just got posted, like, a week or two later. I would probably, and this is just my opinion, I would probably maybe not apply just that quickly, because if that's a similar role, 2 weeks is like, that's still really fresh for those people who are interviewing, right? So if it's like, hey, we just rejected Cheyenne for this role, she applied again. Well, she interviewed 2 weeks ago, and nothing's really changed between this role and in the time that we rejected her. So that's something that I would be mindful of. So whoever asked that question, something to think about. Is it a similar role? And also, how soon are you applying? And then it comes to that question of how far you are applying to something new, right? Because that plays into it. It's like, if this was a long time ago, like a year ago, and it's like, now I want to reapply again, if you upskilled in that 1 year, right? Like, you have some new things on your resume, you've got new skills to talk about, like, that could be an advantage to reapply. Right. And then also, I would also ask the question of like, what is the role as well? Like, again, is it a similar role or something that is different? I would also be mindful of what that is, right? Like, because I also, again, my opinion is like, are you just applying to like everything, or are you still showing that there's a path that you are wanting to follow, right? Because it's like, hey, I applied for a marketing associate today. Tomorrow it's like a marketing manager. The next day is a marketing partnership role. Then at least as a recruiter, I can say, oh, Cheyenne really wants to be in marketing, right? But if it's like a marketing associate, a data analyst, an office admin, then I'm starting to be like, I wonder where she really wants to go, right? And that could be a little bit confusing. So that's also another thing to think about, like when you are like reapplying to a company, because at least from my experience, like we hold your, we have applications from all the roles that you have. So if I click your name, like, usually I can see like all the roles that you've applied to. And if I see that, you have a path that it's all marketing roles, then I'll be like, okay, this person really wants to get into marketing, and I can see that path. And I can see that passion, versus like, I'm just applying to like every single thing, and it's like, I'm not quite sure where to land.
Got it. Totally makes sense. Okay, I see another question coming in from LinkedIn. They said they've gone through about 5 to 6 phone screens with different companies, and they have felt really good about the conversations that they were having. But after about a month of doing that, they've not heard back from any recruiters or anything for maybe another conversation. How do you suggest that they go about maybe getting back in touch, or should they, look to make contact with them again?
Yeah, absolutely. Always follow up, right? If you've already had that direct connection, that two-way street that was made, that they reached out to you, you reached out to them, you scheduled these calls did happen, right? A relationship has already been made. Definitely follow up, and it could be as simple as, hey, last week on Thursday, I had a talk with the hiring manager or the recruiter. I thought the conversation went great. I'm still super excited about this opportunity. I haven't heard back. Just want to know, if there's any next steps, right? So yeah, never be afraid to just follow up, right? I think sometimes I know some people have asked me like, I don't want to follow up. I don't want to be like I don't want to bother them and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's okay. Like, especially if there hasn't been any communication, between your phone call and finding out the next step. Like, it's not a bad thing to just like reconnect with them and say, hey, I've had these conversations, I just want to know if there's any follow-up, anything that you need from me, or is there a decision that's been made. I just would like to know. So always follow up.
And what do you think, Marie, that like sweet spot is? Maybe you do that initial follow-up X amount of days later. If you still don't hear back, you follow up. Like, what's that number?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's really a number in mind, but I would say, like, say you had the phone call, right? I'm always the type of like, I like to follow up with an email like right after the interview's done, right? So if I talk to someone today, hey Shan, thanks so much for talking to me today. I can't wait to hear more.
Same.
And especially like if it's like a Friday, right? So like if it's a Friday, I would probably be like, maybe next, Wednesday, I'd be like, okay, just following up, like making sure, like I probably wouldn't follow up like first thing on Monday, right? Because it's like, what would they have done over the weekend? So, it's almost like you kind of just have like that self-awareness a bit as well. Like when you're thinking about like, when do I do that? But I would say like, a weekly follow-up isn't a bad thing. Maybe if it's this Friday, then next Friday, if you still haven't heard something, like follow up again, right? So yeah, I don't think there's like a good or bad way of cadence, but I think if you're like self-aware enough to be like, okay, I'm not going to follow up Friday afternoon and then Monday morning, like, like maybe, you would know like, oh, I'll give it some time. So
100%. I totally agree. That's actually so funny because at Wonsulting, we always talk about like relentlessly follow up. If you feel like the conversation went really well, authentically, like you truly do feel like the conversation was great, maybe you hit it off, follow up. If you don't hear back, follow up again. We usually say like 3 to 5 business days, but again, if it's a Friday, everyone write this down as well. If it's a Friday, don't follow up on Monday. Your recruiter hasn't even had the chance to digest you yet. They are people too, Saturday to Sunday, those are their days. And they haven't maybe had the chance to look at it, and that's okay. I love it. Okay, let's go ahead with another question. Ghosting is a response itself. Yes, ghosting sucks. We're so sorry if you guys are experiencing that. I've been job searching since May. Megan said I've been job searching since May, and I had a handful of first round interviews. What's your best tip to have a better shot at securing a second round? I can't seem to get past that threshold of the initial screening or the initial interview, and I'm not quite sure why.
That's a great question. Yeah. I would say, I mean, again, self-awareness, looking at yourself in the mirror, what are some good things that are working, right? Like you're obviously getting to this stage, right? So think about like what is working for you right now. Like there's obviously something like, is it your resume? Like, is it your initial conversation with your recruiter? Like kind of leveraging like the things that are working is always a good place to start, right? Okay, if it's my resume that's getting through, if the recruiter is reaching out to me, maybe that's where I start, right? Like, oh, I'm getting into these first rounds. Maybe I even ask my recruiter, like, hey, I'm getting to these first round interviews. What are some things that you think I should tackle, or what are some focus areas that I might be expected to answer during this interview? And if there's anything that you can share with me, I would love to be able to prep, right? Because sometimes recruiters do that. Like I know sometimes I do that with my candidates, where it's like, hey, you're going to talk to the hiring manager, you're going to talk about nothing but production and games, right? Like, and so that's going to be the focus, right? So then I want my candidates like, make sure that that's what you think about when you are interviewing, right? So use that. Like if you're talking to a recruiter already, leverage them, ask them like what you could be focusing on these first rounds, because then at least like once you get to that first round interview, And like, and if you don't, if you didn't move past that, then you can start doing that self-reflection and be like, I wonder, was it a certain question that I was asked that I may not have like given full details to? Maybe they asked me a question and another qualifying question, but I didn't quite answer it the way that they wanted to hear it, etc. So, I think like when you leverage the recruiter to help you with that like first round, what you're going to talk about, and then reflecting after that interview, like that can sometimes like reveal some answers, right? Hopefully that helps answer that question.
Yeah, Megan, we hope it helps. We wish you the best. We're hoping that you can maybe take those tips and then get past first round. That's obviously the goal. We're here for you. We're rooting you on. We're in your corner. We have a question coming in from YouTube. It says, what if I wowed the recruiter that's in my peer group in terms of age, and then I have a second round interview with the general hiring manager that's more senior, and for some reason they couldn't see my vision? How do I, kind of reapproach that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's knowing your audience, right? Like if you're talking to someone peer to peer, like there might be a certain energy or detail in your storytelling that like super relates to them, right? Like, I mean, I know this, right? Like the way I talk to my friends, how I talk to you, Cheyenne, may not be like how I talk to like maybe like, my skip level manager, right? So like if I'm thinking about that, like you want to just know who your audience is and like maybe what they would want to know. If I'm talking peer to peer, right, I'm going to talk about, just the whole vision, right? Shan, okay, I'm going to tell you about this whole project I have from beginning to end. We're going to just like, talk it out as friends. It's be a good time, right? But if it's a senior person, maybe I'm not giving them like the whole story. Maybe it's like the big beats, right? Like, here's the vision. Here's what I've done. Here's what the impact is, right? And like that's because you know who your audience is, right? Like, and also like if you are able to ask and know, like, yeah, like what is it that they want to see, right? Like, hey, if I'm going to go to the senior manager about this project that I'm going to have, what are the big things that he would like to see? Or like, what is his style? Does he like a presentation, or does he just want it to be super concise, verbal communication? Is it better in writing? Like you can ask those questions too, because I think it's so important to know who your audience is, and then cater to that, right? And of course, like I feel like the more senior people get, the more straightforward they need things to be, right? But it has to be straightforward enough that they know, like, I'm getting all my answers, in one go, right? It's kind of funny. Like I've seen this thing on LinkedIn where it's like when you're in school, you're supposed to write this like 3,000 page thesis, but then when you're in the workplace, it's like, tell me in one PowerPoint slide or I'm out of here. Right? That's kind of what it is. Like you might be talking to the peer who's fine to read the 3,000 word thesis, or the senior manager just might be like, one slide, 5 minutes, go. Right. And so like you have to know who your audience is, and you have to know, how do I break down this thing in different ways, right? If it's my thesis, here it is. If it's a PowerPoint, here it is. If it's a half-page doc, here it is. But can you break it down in those different ways, right? So hopefully
100%. Yeah. And I think to kind of plus one bow to your question is, when you're in that process, right, and you're approaching this conversation style with someone new, plus one to everything Marie said. But I also think in addition to that, you need to let your key points, which I think is always a pretty good way to frame it, if you know that you're going to be speaking to a manager or a hiring manager who is maybe more senior. But I think the way you frame this really comes back down to give them that big impact, metrics, goals. Like this showcases your ability and your insight, your vision, and then let them ask you the questions that they feel is relevant to get across those smaller details, right? Because if they're curious or if they want to know more, they will ask you, and you'll be prepared to share that information. But you also want to make sure that you come in saying, I know your time is valuable, X, Y, and Z, show you that impact, show you that I care about your time. And if I caught your attention with all of that, I'm happy to tell you more. So kind of lead in that direction. I feel like it's pretty foolproof in like my personal experience, because people want, if they're curious, they will ask more questions or they'll ask clarifying questions. And it gives you the chance to let your work speak for itself and then come back in and say, oh, but I'm happy to share whatever else you may be looking to know more about.
Exactly. And it's always cool too when like they do ask a question, you already have it in your back pocket. Like then that shows like, man, they really thought about this, right? Like they were almost expecting that question, right? So like when you show up that way too, like I feel like that just levels you up.
Yeah, you're like,
yeah. Like we're gonna ask that.
Exactly. I love it. Okay, guys. Well, we have about 3 more minutes, so this will probably be our last question. Maria said, what is your opinion on jobs that say they're entry level but ask for multiple years of experience? As someone who's switched careers, what's the best way to strategize on how to get noticed by recruiters and companies when I have years of experience in another field, but I'm trying to showcase those transferable skills somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So I guess the first half of the question is I definitely believe entry level should be entry level, right? Like that should not ask for like, any type of years of experience, right? Like I think entry level has been weirdly defined across the years. But I say like again, my opinion is that if we can get entry level to back to what it actually meant a long time ago, then it's not, any years of experience is required. But for that question, I mean, it's really how do I say it? Like, I guess from like a resume perspective, right? Like a resume is a language, right? Like that's a really good way to look at it. Like a resume is a language and you have to kind of like match language to that job description, right? And so if you have years of experience, but this job is saying, needs years of experience in X, Y, and Z, like how you translate your years of experience, in writing to match that job description, like that's where the key is. Like that's really where that's really how you stand out, because it's like, okay, like I need this, my resume says this right now, but the job description is looking for that. I need to translate my resume language to match that language so that when people are looking at it through the lens of that job, like they know that this is what's relatable, right? This is what's relevant, right? And I think that's another thing is like, make sure that it's also relevant experience, right? Like make sure it's stuff that do make sense. But that's the hardest part, right? Because I know like a lot of people are like, well, I've only ever worked as an office manager and like I don't know how to do, XYZ job. But it's like, well, as an office manager, I know that those are people who wear multiple hats, right? They're the ones running around doing a lot of different things, helping a lot of different folks. You're a cross-functional partner, right? Like you're able to juggle multiple projects and multiple things at the same time, right? Like you're a multitasker. You probably know a lot about the business because it's like marketing is over here calling you to do this thing, but then maybe production on the other end is calling you to help for this other thing. So you know how these other like divisions work. So it's really just about like, what is that experience? What have you done? And just like how you translate that, to match what the job is looking for, right? And again, the job description is there to tell you exactly what it's looking for, right? Those requirements, those responsibilities. So it's just really about like, changing the language, right? Again, remember, resume is like a language, changing that language so that like the person who's reading it from the job description perspective, like can see like, oh, I see why that experience elsewhere like translates to this job. So
100%. And we're not telling you guys to go and just like take the job description and put it in your resume. What we're telling you is read that job description and say, maybe this is my personal favorite thing. Highlight those keywords, right? The things that stand out to you that you're like, oh, I feel like I've done that. Or maybe, oh, I don't know if I've done that yet. And you go through and then you go back to your daily job description for yourself, or maybe, if you do things outside of your job description, you look at your full roster of roles and responsibilities and you say, okay, well, to showcase this, I would say that this, and this bullet or these tasks that I do match this. And how I'm going to show it is by using those key terms that they're using. So that way I can showcase to them, yes, this is what's coming across. This is how it's being done. And be prepared in your interview to actually more thoroughly explain that. because they might not fully understand. They might say, oh, well, they say that they've done this, but I wonder how that works, because maybe that person has never interviewed someone from that, the background that you come from, or maybe they've never seen what it takes to fulfill the role that you're in, that you're saying cross-functional to what the role that they're looking for is. Be sure to tell your story. Resumes are a language. I think that that's a really great way to put it. Thank you all so much for being here. Marie, the biggest thank you to you. We're so grateful for you. And we're grateful for you taking the time. Thank you everyone for sticking here with us over time and sticking with us through our technical difficulties in the beginning, but we're so grateful for all of you. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. You guys can ask us any other questions, specifically me, if you have anything you want to know, and we're happy to help. We're here for you guys, and we're praying that you all have a really, really great job search process, and we're rooting for you. We're in your corner. So good luck to everyone. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.